This is not the episode about werewolves that I planned because, well, I think there might be something to the stories of dogmen. Welcome to Truly Terrified, Paranormal versus Physics, where we talk about some really weird stuff, and Joe the Scientist explains how it's not possible, or maybe it is. I'm Lynn, and
I'm Joe.
Although I'm using dogman and werewolf interchangeably, there is a difference. A werewolf is different than the dogman because the werewolf transitions from a dog into a man or a wolf. A dog or a wolf, a canid, into a man, and vice versa. So he changes back and forth. Whereas the dogman seems to be trapped in the middle. He's just like half man, half dog, crazy wild thing. So he has dog, he's a dog, but he's got man-like capabilities, like he walks upright, and he might even be able to vocalize or say a word. Because we don't know if the creatures seen in the stories that I'm going to tell you were capable of changing or were stuck as some anthropomorphic dog, I feel like there really isn't a distinct difference as far as it pertains to first-person accounts. You can't really know whether that was a werewolf or a dogman. So one of the earliest reports of a dogman sighting was around the Great Lakes, in Wisconsin specifically, because, interestingly enough, in the United States, most recent dogman/werewolf sightings have been around the Great Lakes, like Wisconsin, Michigan, Illinois.
Wouldn't expect that.
It is weird. I have a theory, and I'll tell you about it in a little bit. Okay, so this was near the city of Racine, Wisconsin. That's on the western coast of Lake Michigan near the Illinois border. In 1936, so this goes way back, 1936, Mark Shackleman, who was a night watchman for the St. Coletta Convent, encountered a strange creature during his rounds. Shackleman described the creature as having a canine appearance, black fur, a foul odor, and long claws. He saw it kneeling and scratching at an indigenous burial ground near the convent. When Shackleman approached, the creature fled. I mean, this is like so many other cryptid stories we hear. The following day, Shackleman returned to the site and found footprints and claw marks, noting that 2 of the fingers appeared withered. So on the footprints, he's calling them fingers. He's not calling them toes. So that's interesting. The guy was scheduled to work 2 nights in a row, so he went back the next night, and once again he saw the creature scratching at this mound. And if you are familiar with that region of the world, they have burial mounds that were indigenous peoples.
Aren't they huge?
Yeah, they're huge. Yeah, often they're quite huge. And convents frequently, because that's what Christianity did, they conscript that area for their own religious meaning. And so think about that convent north of Galena, Illinois. I can't think of what its name was, but that one had been a huge, gigantic burial mound, Native American burial mound. And they built a convent on top of it. You know, it's just what they did. And probably would still if they could get away with it. But in any case, that night that he saw the creature scratching around the mound, it didn't run away. Instead, it stood up, and it was like 6 feet tall. And it made eye contact with Shackleman. Then it spoke a single word, which sounded more like a name, Gidara. Okay, that's really bizarre. Number 1, it wasn't a dog. It stood up on its hind legs and was 6 feet tall. An Irish wolfhound would be that tall, but it wouldn't be able to say Gidara. Now, could it have been growling, and that's what it sounded like? I will concede that's possible.
Well, so you always have to look at like the sources of possible error or deviation from the obvious interpretation. So like the guy could be an error or
yes,
something from him. The creature itself could have been misinterpretation.
Yes.
It could be a communication problem. So like after the guy has told the story and then as it mutates across people.
That is all true.
And they're not mutually exclusive. Each one could be compounding on the others.
That is very true.
To the point where it could have been, up to the point where it could have been a completely different event. Completely different.
Yes. Yes.
Where everything is different.
So I'm going to continue with this, and we will have plenty of opportunities to look at these and examine these different scenarios. Shackleman was terrified, but he maintained eye contact, prayed to God, and he slowly walked away. The dog man sneered at him, but did not move, and Shackleman never saw the creature again, although he said he often smelled the scent of decaying flesh. Okay, so the thing about that story that makes that a dog man and not a werewolf is that it spoke a word, because nothing else in there distinguishes it from being a werewolf. A werewolf is a canid human, and a dog man just is stuck there, but the dog man can speak. So werewolves are people who can transform into wolves, often during a full moon. The origins of the werewolf legend are unclear, but some scholars believe it may have originated in the Epic of Gilgamesh, which is the oldest known Western prose. So the Epic of Gilgamesh, I looked it up and I just decided I wasn't even going to go there because it is a very old piece of literature originating from ancient Mesopotamia. It's poetic. It dates back to about 2100 BCE, and it's about the king of Uruk and his quest for immortality. It just is very, very deep. I don't know how that pertains to the legend of werewolves. I don't know, because I couldn't see anything, and just scanning what, when people do, like, they distill it down and they just give a abbreviated version. I couldn't see anything about it, but whatever. So what that guy saw in Wisconsin would have been not a werewolf, but a dog man, if we're going by that classic example. Here's another one. This one happened in Duluth. So strictly not in Wisconsin, but really Duluth is like right over the border into Minnesota. It's the westernmost point of Lake Superior. On November 7th, 2016. So this is very recent. A graphic designer who wants to remain anonymous, although I know exactly who it is because I know things like that, reported a sighting in this area. Thanks to her artistic skills, she was able to create a detailed sketch of the creature. If you're watching on YouTube, I'll insert the sketch here, because I have found the sketch. So it was a cold night on Maple Grove Road, which is a stretch of road marking the border between residential Duluth and the outskirts of town, which is an area of dense and dark forest and fields and farms. The anonymous witness, this artist, observed an upright cryptid running from the edge of the lamppost-lit residential area into a field with an old barn. She estimated the creature to be about 7 feet tall when not running on all fours. It had an extremely hunched back, a wolf-like face, and a long snout, short, pointed ears, and moved stiffly and awkwardly, reminiscent of a gorilla walking on its haunches. She froze. She watched the creature until a pair of passing headlights illuminated its silhouette more clearly, and then she became suddenly terrified and panicked and drove to a well-lit gas station where she called her husband and waited for him to come and go home with her because she was scared. She shared her encounter with her family, and her sister revealed that she had seen the same creature years before standing at the edge of her property and staring at her house with piercing red eyes. Okay, piercing red eyes. Let's just discuss how eyes appear red.
Oh,
if you
when
light shines in them a certain way. Certain eyeballs, other eyeballs look white. Mm-hmm. Like a deer's eyes don't look red when you shine light in them. They look white. But human beings' eyes look red. So that was interesting. I don't know about dogs. I think dogs look white.
I don't know. But regardless, you don't just have glowing eyes.
No.
It's reflected light.
It's reflected
100% always.
Yes.
Unless you're a robot or something. I mean, animals do not ever have glowing eyes.
No.
So
they do not. They might have a glowing butt if you're a firefly. But...
So there's no reason why any creature that sees with its eyes should have light emitting from its eyes. So
no, I agree.
I mean, I have to really hammer that point because that's a common thing. Like
glowing eyes.
In media, you'll see glowing eyes.
No.
That is so contrary to being able to see with those same organs.
Now, when you're out in the woods and you look around and you see little pinpoints of eyes staring at you, it's because it's reflecting that light from the moon or
Yeah.
other ambient light
Yeah,
in the
it's
area.
a reflection.
It
It's
is
not.
definitely not that their eyes are glowing like they're possessed by some demon.
So glowing eyes doesn't necessarily rule out anything.
It doesn't mean anything.
But if they say it's like, oh, it's shooting, like red light of their eyes or whatever,
right,
implying that, they're wrong 100%.
So I'm going to show you a picture. Here's the picture that the graphic artist created. So she shows a timber wolf, how tall, how large it is, a black bear, a white-tailed deer, a moose, and then this thing that she saw. So you can see the comparison.
What does that say on top?
Timber wolf, black bear, white-tailed deer, moose, unidentified creature. So she's saying the unidentified creature was
as big as a moose.
As big as a moose. And then she said her concept of the muscling and fur of it is this, but what she actually saw was this when the lights were
silhouette.
behind it.
Yeah, so it's nighttime.
Yes. So, and also,
presumably she doesn't know, it's not like she knew the exact distance to the thing.
Right. And that can be very deceiving.
Yeah, so there's like certain conditions where range estimation and size estimation by extension are easier, but for the most part this has been tested, people can't really estimate distance past a certain point. It's like 10 feet. You have to be moving in order to estimate distance better, because your eyes can't differentiate at that point. So size estimation's the same thing. You have to really know, you have to kind of estimate the distance to know the size.
Right.
You can't estimate the distance if it's farther than 10 feet. Now, if you're using like relative sizes, you can estimate this distance. But if it's just like grass, probably not.
Yeah, a dark night, dark woods.
And if it's dark, man, I mean, if someone said they saw a deer and it was big, like they said, oh, it was this big, I would use if it was the same condition, I would use the same facts to say, well, they're probably wrong. So they see a wolf, let's say it was a wolf. Let's say they said, oh yeah, it was definitely a wolf and it was this big. They're probably wrong, I mean, just in general.
So the other thing to consider is that, and we know this to be true because this has happened to us, animals that are perfectly normal and not unusual at all to be seen in a particular area, for instance, a deer, in a particular aspect. So if it's turned in a certain direction, its features will look elongated in places that they're not actually elongated or foreshortened or whatever. And so it might look like something else. For instance, although we know there actually have been kangaroos sighted in Wisconsin, it's been proven, bodies have been found. Kangaroos also, deer also resemble kangaroos in certain positions when they're jumping. So, and they're the same color as kangaroos. So the fact that this is the same size as a moose, it could have been a moose.
Yeah, it could have been a moose.
What my point is that there have been lots of these stories that dogmen have been seen in the Great Lakes areas of Wisconsin and Michigan. So I just have to point out, there is a particular type of person, usually a man, who lives in the woods of that area, and he seems odd. He usually lets his hair get out of control, full beard, wild hair. He's often filthy. He looks pretty wild. And they are called Jack Pine Savages. And they are real people. I'm not discounting that what these sightings are is nothing more than backwoods people who are, for lack of a better word, awkward. And they see these people.
Oh, saying the person, was a person.
It could have been a person running or leaning over, going through somebody's trash.
Of course, the person is smaller than a moose, but...
Yes, but again, you can't really judge size.
Actually, that brings up a good point. Let's say it was a person in a suit. I mean, let's just say it was a person in a suit. We knew it was a person in a suit. Then is that scenario more likely than that we know it was some cryptid, or like a werewolf, whatever? It's much more likely, generally speaking, you should say it's much more likely the thing I know is possible, 100% I know it's possible, versus this thing that requires like additional things to actually be proven to exist. So like a man in a suit, it could be a man in a suit. Like, why is he wearing the suit? I don't know. Who cares? it's possible. I mean, suits can exist. People dress up in suits. Be
They're
out there.
poaching deer wearing one of those, what are those called? Ghillie suits or whatever?
Yeah, maybe a ghillie suit.
I mean, there's all different kinds of things. It could even,
like an animal.
Yes.
We've already established in a different episode, wolves with mange look crazy, or coyotes with mange. They look out of this world.
Yeah. So let's go back to European folklore about the werewolf.
Okay.
They are often described as men who turn into wolves at night, and they eat people, animals, or corpses, but then they return to human form during the day. Some werewolves can supposedly change shape at will, while others change involuntarily due to a curse or affliction or heredity. In some stories, werewolves can only regain their human form by putting their clothes back on, but it's unclear how they do this without hands or thumbs. Werewolves are often associated with primal human instincts, trickery, and untamed energies. They can also be interpreted as a symbol of the struggle between good and evil, or the uncontrollable nature of human emotions. But I have a simpler explanation. The legend of the werewolf and the disease rabies share some intriguing similarities and differences, but there are some similarities, particularly in their characteristics, symptoms, and impact on human perception and folklore. So the legend of the werewolf originates from various cultures, primarily European. It has roots in ancient folklore and mythology. It's, by all accounts, considered a mythical creature. It's often depicted as a human transforming into a wolf-like creature. It embodies fears, superstitions, and the human-animal duality, while rabies is a viral disease, and it's been present for thousands of years. It affects mammals. It's primarily transmitted through the bite of an infected animal. It's a medical condition. It's well documented. So there you go. So there's two different things. So this is how it goes. So the legend of the werewolf involves a person turning into a wolf-like creature. They're depicted as violent, bloodthirsty, uncontrollable. They blend human and wolf features. They have heightened senses and physical abilities. But an animal or person infected with rabies suffers with symptoms like fever, which could make them act erratic or out of their mind, headache, which could make them act erratic or out of their mind, general weakness, which could make them also act weird. As the disease progresses, advanced symptoms are hyperactivity, hallucinations, hydrophobia, which is the fear or avoidance of water, excessive salivation, aggression, and eventually paralysis and then death. It's important to note that rabies is gruesome and torturous. Once the symptoms appear, it's almost always fatal without prompt treatment, and even with treatment, sometimes the person or the creature dies. But rabies could have influenced the myth of the existence of werewolves. It's obvious to me anyway. A person in a community becomes infected with rabies after coming in contact with an infected animal, like a bat or a fox or a raccoon or whatever else, there is. I think raccoons are more likely to be a carrier than bats, but in any case. As they get sicker, they act erratically and violently towards others, and if able to, they could infect other people through their violent behavior, like biting them, scratching them, breathing on them, coughing on them, bleeding on them. So if the people in the community had ever seen a rabid wolf or other animal, they'd be familiar with the behavior, and rather than attribute it to sickness, they might call it wolf-like or dog-like. So if you see a rabid dog, and then you see a person acting like a rabid dog, if you don't know that it's rabies, you might say they're acting like a wild dog. They're acting like a wild wolf. I think that's probably more likely part of the various cultures' folklore that represents the fear of the unknown and the wild. Out of that is born the legend of the werewolf. People don't know what is going on here. There's a dangerous animal on the loose. It's large, and we know people inflate the size of things when they're fearful. Mm-hmm. We've seen it on TV shows that we watch. I've seen it in my own life. I've seen things and thought it was much larger than it was, and then to find out it was something quite small. But when you're scared, you can't judge your senses, what your senses are telling you. But I think that what has really promoted the whole thing of werewolves is the universal struggle between human civility and animalistic instincts. And so to attribute somebody's behavior to animalistic, it kind of takes away their humanity. And so to me, that makes perfect sense, that would be where it really came from, is just seeing rabid animals and then seeing a person infected. They are obviously acting like a rabid wolf.
I could see the evolution of the meme where they people who had seen somebody get bitten by an animal are then comparing that person's behaviors to an animal, and then like a wolf, and then the as it's told, word of mouth, it spreads. It becomes, they were the wolf. Became a wolf.
Rabies has always evoked fear due to its gruesome symptoms and its ultimate fatality. And so I would not be at all surprised if that was the beginning of the folklore and myths surrounding the werewolf. So I just don't believe that werewolves exist. I don't believe they've ever existed. I don't believe we've ever found any
so what would it take?
Archaeological evidence that there was.
What would it take for a werewolf to exist? To me, a werewolf is, man gets bitten by a werewolf, sees full moon, it just transforms into a wolf, or like a hybrid man wolf, and then when the moon goes out or it's daytime, they transform back. What would it take for that to be the case? A lot. And
okay, so
who knows why there were certain steps.
Right. You
would
could
occur.
attribute, just like with rabies, that being exposed to something from the patient 1, patient 0, being exposed to something infected would cause you to be infected. Okay, I get that. But why would the moon have anything to do with it?
Yeah, so I mean, that it really, regardless whether werewolves exist or whatever, if somebody sees someone transform into a wolf by the full moon,
it's because you can see something in the full moon.
And they make the association full moon wolf. It's almost certainly still not the full moon causing the transformation. Right. I don't know of any organism that in one night transforms into another organism. That's insane. Like, the part where they transform into a wolf requires a lot. And it's not just like, it's like, it's as a paranormal thing, you wouldn't understand, whatever. If you said, okay, their one body is beamed into another dimension, and then a new body beams in, and that's the wolf, and then their consciousness goes over to the wolf, that would be easier to explain than all of the crazy things you'd have to modify biology.
Level.
Yeah. So like their body is like slowly morphing into a fucking wolf. That seems extremely hard to explain. It would be easier if it was like, oh no, it's the spirit of a wolf, and they like are an astral projection or something, and they're running around as a ghost. That would be easier to explain, because it requires less modifications to reality, our understanding of reality. To take something that we understand very well, we can predict very well how it will behave, but organic machines, bodies, cells, and have it, break that down, modify it. I mean, that's already a very complex model. Trillions of cells working together to make a biomechanical machine. That's not simple. And then to modify it on the fly like that is completely insane.
And you're absolutely right, and I agree with you completely. I think that my theory, and I didn't see it anywhere else online, I actually just developed that theory after reading a bunch of these stories, that, man, that sure sounds like somebody with rabies. I think my theory for the origin of the werewolf myth, I think, is probably pretty accurate. And certainly there were influences by religious people and writings of the day and other stories and, all kinds of other things that's changed as a game of telephone as things change. But as far as the modern ones in Wisconsin and Michigan go, I've been in those woods for decades now, and at all time of day and night, I've driven around in the back roads going to births, and I've never seen anything even remotely like a wolf man or a dog man.
Neither have
I have, however,
I've seen wolves and
I've
bears
seen wolves and bears and coyotes, and I've seen very strange backwoods people who do not want to have an encounter with you in the middle of the night or at any other time. They don't want to have an encounter with you. And I'm going to stereotype here, but unfortunately, they're usually up to no good when they're wandering around. They're poaching animals, or they're going to rob somebody's garage, or, you know, they're doing something they shouldn't be doing and they don't want to interact with you. So they're going to act weird and skittish. So the fact that people see large creatures that terrify them, I think that terrify is the operative word. They're terrified, and that prevents them from being able to see clearly or acknowledge or process clearly what they're seeing.
Yeah, I mean, that's the most obvious explanation. Another possible explanation, okay, consider this. Wolves that evolved to walk upright, or a wolf were a wolf that turns into a man when it sees the full sun. I don't know. Like, what, you know, you like have one thing, why not the other? A wolf that walks upright.
Yeah.
A wolf that's unusually smart. It acts like a person. Dogs can do that. They can open doors after seeing a person.
You can teach a dog to talk using those little touchpads.
We have this bias to go from, like, especially after hearing it's a werewolf, you know, it's a man who transforms into a wolf. You think a person transforms into a wolf. But if you see like a wolf walking upright, you think werewolf, okay? So it's a man that transformed into a wolf. But what if it's just a wolf walking upright? Dogs and wolves. Actually, I don't know that wolves can, but I imagine they can, because dogs can walk upright.
Yeah, so the other day, you may remember, I looked out back and I saw one of the neighbor's kittens walking around, and then it walked, I think it was following a squirrel or something, and then it got on its hind legs and walked for a good distance on its hind legs. It looked exactly like a circus bear. If it had had a little skirt on, it would have been a miniature circus bear, the way its little hands were out and everything, and it walked quite a distance like that. So yes, it could be that a dog/wolf walks upright. It could have been a bear. There are so many other things that it could be that are more likely than it's a dog man. Except that dog man just implies that it's a man that
also I should
misattributed being a dog.
I should say dog man werewolf distinction. If we knew one existed, I mean, we know quote unquote dog men, people who are very hairy, do exist. But if we knew like a dog man hybrid who could talk existed, then we could make a distinction between that and a werewolf. But as it is, how could you like, for instance, dogmen can talk, werewolves can't. Says who? Says the person who studies them and goes out and collects their droppings, and like it's not like this is they're either are well understood if they even exist, you know?
Exactly.
So all in all, werewolves, actually it's a similar story to vampirism, which we've done an episode on. Vampires, there are explanations, historical explanations of why those stories developed. There are potential historical explanations, reasonable, like everyday explanations for how the stories of werewolves developed. It's not in the same category as like UFOs, where multiple people see the same thing and over a long period of time, and there's video evidence and photographic evidence, and a lot of credible people believe in werewolves. That's not how it is. Now, that said, it's more like in the realm of superheroes. It's fine they're fake. The stories are still cool.
Yeah.
But if you start saying like it was real, you should have more justification than just it looked like a big wolf walking on its hind legs. Because there are regular everyday explanations for even that.
In the show notes, I have included a link to a book by Linda Godfrey about hunting the American werewolf, and it's specifically about dogmen in Wisconsin. So you might be interested in that. Truly Terrified is a Salt of the Earth production. Tell us your story and send us your comments. You can send us a 3-minute voicemail at 715-575-9420 or text us at that same number. Email us at lynnandjoeonthego@gmail.com. Our contact information is also in the show notes. Please share, subscribe, and leave a review wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening, and never be so terrified you can't run.
You don't get bit by the werewolf.